I don't know how much you've played with ChatGPT, but you can see that there is concerns in some ways around how that's best used.
You know, you can do all that kind of time-consuming, like layering, like various things that you have to do to kind of plant the foundations of something, but you still need to be capable yourself of then interpreting that and evolving it forwards.
Also trying to push clients to be utilizing new types of technology, and now with the image generation stuff, we're really keen on finding like interesting ways to use this.
There is this school of thought, even Elon Musk refers to this, where the artificial intelligence would take over the humanity.
I think if you look at some of the Mark Zuckerberg deposition, where 70-year-old men essentially asking Mark Zuckerberg how they log into their Facebook account, gives you an idea that trying to legislate for tech that's changing by the day is implausible.
In terms of business, where would you think will be the next platform which could encapsulate AI, which would help business individuals?
The idea that the entertainment industry can be tailored to the individual's requirements. So if I want a show like the US Office, but that's set in a advertising agency, can be generated on the fly, that's genuinely good, is an entirely different way of even thinking.
I am playing devil's advocate a little bit. I am quite excited about what it kind of means and what changes we'll see. But it's good to hear someone like you who's like thinking deeply about this, actually, seeing the positives. It makes me have more of a kind of positive attitude too.
Welcome, folks. Welcome to the Website Intelligence Podcast, or TWIP. Today we have a very, very special episode with a trending topic about artificial intelligence. You see all the buzz out there with ChatGPT, DALL-E, other crazy platforms doing all sorts of things. We have Mr. Tom Price today from Diva Agency. Just to give a quick overview on it, Diva Agency work with clients like from the gaming industry, from Elden Rings to Alan Wake or other popular video games like Guardians of the Galaxy. Welcome, Tom.
Thank you, Dragos. Yeah. It's good to be chatting. Yeah, you're right. That is what Diva do. We're kind of we started off as a marketing agency for video games and brands and so on. We started with PlayStation, which has been our bread and butter for like a few years, but in the past year or two, my team have been trying to implement not necessarily artificially intelligent tools, but tools to kind of help solve repetitive tasks, help automate things like video production, and just challenges where the studio members didn't want to be working on things that we wanted to free people to work on creative endeavors more than production type work. And in the last year, with things like ChatGPT, with things like Midjourney, Stable Diffusion, and so on, it's a lot of those companies' kind of motto is about freeing people to be creative and so on. And so yeah, for the last year or so, we've been using tools like that to help clients like with creating unique content and speeding up a multitude of different things in our studio, whether it's like writing copy, whether it's image generation, whether it's solving problems that were sort of unsolvable before. We've been doing it, and in the last year I've sort of have a lot of a take on the ethical concerns around it, and I'm sure you guys have I don't know how much you've played with ChatGPT, but you can see that there is concerns in some ways around how that's best used and what role that fills in a company that write a lot of copy, for example, and how it's best used and so on.
Yeah. So I spent a good chunk of my Christmas on ChatGPT, just exploring what was possible.
It's addictive. They're all addictive.
Amazing.
They're sort of, they're using all of the tools that have been built by YouTube and so on to play on the idea of like getting people to just keep spending time on it. I know Midjourney, which is a image creation software from text, is so addictive that you're getting people that I have a friend who he was one of the first people on Midjourney, and he was saying, he's like, "Oh, just put you to bed in a minute, kids," to his two kids, and then it would get to 9 o'clock and they're still sort of sat with him just generating images. So yeah, they're super addictive.
Well, let me say a massive thanks for coming to our podcast, and because our
My
audience are accustomed to our traditional structure, I'll just dive into our first question. It's about where you actually grew up, and what would you say was unique about being there in your younger years, let's say.
Yeah, I grew up in a little town just outside of London, which was like difficult to get places, difficult to see your friends when you're 14 because you're relying on lifts from people and so on, which now I suppose is probably less of a problem. Like we found, so being in the gaming industry, we found that with the pandemic, for people that gamed, it gave them a lifeline to maintain their social circles, which had the pandemic happened when I was a kid, we would have been isolated with no ability to like stay connected with people. And I think like maybe it was just the time, but probably what was unique is that the internet sort of was coming into being existing sort of around my early teenage years, but I have always like maintained that I think that subculture at my age then was really important. So the things what people wore, and the little town you could identify people instantly because of the type of trousers they were wearing and stuff. I think it like gave it was just a nice thing that you sort of knew who your people were based on their aesthetic. And
Who were your
I
people?
think that people that wore really baggy, dirty clothes, and I haven't changed that much since because I still wear all the same stuff. But yeah, people that listen to aggressive music, basically.
Perfect.
Yeah.
One thing, so I've known Tom for getting on for 2 decades, which is pretty frightening. But one thing I've always known about you is that you just have this like brain, which is somehow like at the intersection between like tech and like geekiness, and then creativity on the other side. Like where did that happen in your childhood? Like when did you start having that kind of like very creative, but also very like techie approach to things?
I think that as I've got older, I think that I have realized how important it is to not be serious about work, especially if your work doesn't require some sort of surgery or something like that. I think like I really, as I've got older, and Matt would probably attest to this, I've realized that for me the process of a job or a creative endeavor is the thing that I'm looking for. I'm looking for the flow state of being just immersed in a thing, and I without realizing, as I was a kid, I think I was always looking for how do I find like the spark of being into something, whatever it might be. When we made music together, when I look back on it now, what I wanted from that was the first 20 minutes of this is amazing, and beyond that I kind of gave up on it because I liked the flow state. And now when I look at work that we do as a company, I look back on what I enjoyed of that bit, and it was the initial concepting, it was the ideation bit, it was the spark of something, and I think that's just something that the more I think about it, the more that's what I want to get back to. I want to get back to this feeling of, and it's something that kids are being told to. Kids lose and then we spend our whole adult life trying to get back the idea of play and the idea of being like so immersed in what your work is that you forget what it is. And I think that's
this
so
is
invaluable to try and find it.
it's so true. But if you remember the first maybe the first thoughts on what would be your first job, or what did you want it to be when you grew up, or the first kind of jobs you were looking at?
I did not think about it barely at all when I was a child. Until I started having heroes, and like heroes for me were people that, in boxing, so Muhammad Ali, martial artists like Bruce Lee and so on, and I liked their like mentality and so on. And I guess I had the idea that I would be in some sort of like physical, like something physical. And then when I started getting hit in boxing, I realized it's like not even fun at all. I did boxing for quite a few years, and the higher up the weight rankings I went, the more unpleasant it was being hit. And then I decided this is just not fun.
So you went directly from kind of combat sports straight into kind of design and tech and music. What came first? Was it music that came first, or was it more like computers and tech?
Yeah, so, well, the tech was always the thing that I got excited about. I liked finding ways or hacks or tricks to create something faster, and I think that's like always been part of my career. But yeah, I didn't know what I was going to do right up until right up until I went traveling for 2 years. And I still didn't know what I was going to do then.
Where did you travel?
Where?
Yeah.
I traveled. I did a standard kind of round the world trip that was Thailand and Australia and America and places like that. And then after that, I took another gap year because I wasn't sure what I wanted to do, and did a lot of hitchhiking. I hitchhiked down to Morocco. I hitchhiked to Prague, and then a lot of other trips. But yeah, music was always a thing that I loved, but didn't. I was in groups of friends who played instruments. I didn't ever kind of gel with learning the guitar or anything. So I started music production, and then I did a degree in music production. And then from there, met Matt, met lots of other people in the music world, and just started from there. But it was always tech based, as in I was trying to, it was computer based music production. And yeah.
It's interesting when you talk about this like flow state thing, because that's 100% like, I guess, the way that I like feel like reflecting back on that time. It's those moments where we just kind of sat and like played some music for the first time and got into some kind of zone. And then the whole concept of then having to go out and do something with that was just kind of frustrating and a bit awkward. When would you say was the first time that you were able to find that kind of flow state, but in work? Like in the context of actually having a job that gave you that benefit?
I didn't really think that I was in it until I now reflect back. So me and another member of the band that we were in, like, split off from. We thought that by starting a design agency, we would have more time to make music, which, as it turns out, is just not the case at all. It's really, really challenging, and you need to work all hours. And our mentality, or our motto, was just take on the work, and if we need to learn the tools to deal with it, then we'll learn them on the job, which is what we've done, and probably what I've always done. But when I look back now, I would find flow state in learning software. I'd find, and I miss it because I don't do much of it anymore. But when I was writing code, I would find a flow state in that, and you lose sense of time, and you're just involved in that moment. And I think it's such an important part of any industry or any sport, it's the thing that I think people should be living for in a lot of ways, is finding ways where they're immersed to a point that nothing else is relevant. Which is why in our company I'm really like keen to avoid context switching, because it drives me mad.
So straight from the music background, you went into the technology sector, or there were any other milestones in between?
I No, I went from making music to telling clients that we were 3D experts, that we were coders, that we built websites, that we had a rich history of it, none of which was actually true. However, I feel that bending the truth is important in some ways, because it pushes you, it helps you move forward. And like with the company now, I think it's important for us to like push ourselves. And maybe it's not the case that we push ourselves by telling clients we can do stuff we can't, but pushing ourselves internally for trying to like find tools that are more valuable, more innovative, and so on. But yeah, so I went, carry on.
I was going to say, so your current role is your technical lead, right? Like, having not really spent any time working in an agency, I don't really know exactly what this entails. Can you just tell us a little bit about what that role like really entails, and what kind of are your kind of key like focus areas there?
Yeah. So I think for different companies that term technical lead means different things. In our company, we do nowadays we do a lot with working with game studios who will give us like access to the build of a game using like tools like Unreal Engine and Unity and so on, and we'll be building on top of what they've already worked on. And I guess with any job, there's always multiple ways of doing something to get the best result. And for me, it's part of my role is finding the best way to get the end result, and often the quickest. And then also trying to push clients to be utilizing new types of technology. And now with the image generation stuff, we're really keen on finding like interesting ways to use this, because I mean we'll get into it later, but as it goes on, things tools like AI are going to play such an important part of everybody's roles.
So before we dive too deep into the AI context, I would just maybe quickly get into the maybe a bit of history, a brief history of language models and some text to image diffusion. If you can give us some elements in this side of things.
Yeah. I think if I go, I'll try and make it brief, but if I go right back to the start of where some of the concepts of AI came from is Alan Turing, which is he's a British mathematician who was around in World War II. He was famous for breaking the German Enigma machine and so on. Well, he built the Enigma machine. But he proposed ideas about he wrote a paper called Computing, Machinery and Intelligence, which was determined a test for how known as the Turing test. It determines a test of how a machine is intelligent, and he predicted with the advances of computing and computing power and so on, at some point there'll be a point at some case where a computer will be able to hold a conversation with a human, and it's impossible for the human to tell whether it's a computer they're talking to or a human. And I think we're seeing at the point now with things like ChatGPT that you could argue that some of the conversations you can have with it are very natural. Yeah. Although ChatGPT specifically is about answering questions, not necessarily conversing, the kind of technology applies in a similar way. So like if I skip past kind of a lot of AI growth from like Alan Turing, which is in the 50s and so on, you're then getting to companies like DeepMind. So DeepMind famously were the company who developed AlphaGo, which was a long-standing part of AI that was it was determined that you couldn't use the type of artificial intelligence that was used to beat chess players to beat something like Go because of the amount of computational resource that was required. Like, stop me if I'm getting too technical on it, but they built a system that essentially was significantly more intelligent. It's something called reinforcement learning, which is where the algorithm starts playing itself with games and gets to a point where it isn't just using computational power, it's using a form of intelligence to solve or play the game of Go. Then
how far back are we going with this?
So AlphaGo, which was DeepMind. So DeepMind started in 2010 from he is an absolute genius. This guy called Demis Hassabis, who so for context, I have a 4-year-old who I'm trying to teach the basics of chess to. He doesn't really have any idea of any of it, but likes throwing the pieces around. At 4, Demis Hassabis was playing chess to like a fairly high standard. At 6, he was at grandmaster standard, and he'd always used games as a way of learning. I think at about 9, he built a chess computer and so on. Then another kind of early form of AI was he took a gap year because he wasn't allowed it to Cambridge University until he had reached a certain age, because he'd done all his qualifications before that. He took a gap year, went to a games company called Bullfrog, who made Theme Park. I don't know if you guys remember it, but it used an early form of AI. He was the lead programmer on that, and he realized that games is a really powerful way to work with AI, because you can simulate situations that would happen in the real world, but you can simulate this infinitely and have so DeepMind used something called agents within their game, within games, to look at how you can deal with strategy and so on. So their models have now been used. The gaming models have now been turned to answer other questions, and I think their motto is trying to solve human intelligence. And we're currently in a state with AI with something like ChatGPT, for example. It's something called narrow AI. So it can do one task. There would be no point. It wouldn't even make sense to ask ChatGPT to open a jam jar. It would have no logic there. It's narrow. Same with image-based models and so on. A lot of companies, OpenAI, who are the ones who make ChatGPT, they're all looking to solve artificial intelligence to have something called AGI, which is artificial general intelligence, which is essentially an algorithm that mimics the human brain that can then solve anything. So that's the intention. The understanding maybe 5 years ago was that yes, that can be solved, but it won't be for a long time. I think with the speed of the change currently happening, people think that you're going to have artificial general intelligence in quite a short within a decade. Now, what that means is from sort of sci-fi novels and so on, the idea of the singularity, which is the point where computers become sentient, is fairly dystopian. And as soon as an AI becomes sentient, that's sort of it for humans, is probably not true. But there's a lot of unknowns with what happens when you have artificial general intelligence.
I feel like already like there's so many like unanswered like questions with regards to the future and where this can possibly go. Like, it's crazy to hear about it. It's like you hear about AI so much, whether it's in the context of science fiction or in the context of technology you're using every day. Just to kind of bring it back down to like kind of now and kind of like solid like applications that you're using today within your role currently at Diva Agency. Like A, how are you using AI already today, and B, how do you envisage that you want to start using it as you move forward, the next 12, 18 months or so?
Yeah, so in terms of, I'll answer it with like two sort of variations, because you've got what's kind of current is ChatGPT, so language models, and then things like Stable Diffusion and Midjourney, which is the image models and so on, and those are both of the things that have a real wow factor of, wait, so I can just get a machine to write my website copy, or I can get a machine to just do all of the art that I need to do for this job. We've used ChatGPT. We've used quite a lot in terms of writing content for presentations, testing out how successful that is and how smart that seems. Because I think like anyone who's played with it can already see sort of certain limitations. However, we shouldn't forget that the reason why this would be my expectation. The reason why ChatGPT is free and currently available for anybody is because they're training those questions to build a much larger data set for when they start charging for it, and the power that they'll have with having had millions and millions of questions being.
I've got a quick question on this point, because I've heard like how much it costs per day to run. Like, how much do you think people are going to end up paying for this thing? Like,
OpenAI, who are backed by Microsoft, have just been valuated at $29 billion. And for a company that are, they're not a year old, but they sort of hit the big time in terms of ChatGPT. I would argue that that's probably not that's probably a reasonable valuation, which is kind of remarkable. And I'll get into the ethics later on. But if you think that this is the free version that they're allowing people to use, the advanced version trained on much more like intricate, granular data and so on is going to be very, very powerful. I mean, we've sort of thought about the ethical standpoint of, we have a lot of artists at work who will use for storyboarding, for scamping work, and so on. We've been using Midjourney and Stable Diffusion already to generate concept art for games, to generate images that are required for a presentation. I mean, for example, we have a Shutterstock account for imagery that we might need. We're using image generation software to just generate those images now, because we don't need to refine them to the point that they're perfect. We want to just get across an idea. And I think that's where, at the moment, that's where they're most powerful, and it still requires the creatives to be involved to generate what's needed. However, it's taken a significant chunk out of time required to work on presentations, for example.
Yeah, this is what I've noticed so far, just like very like base level experimentations with it, is you can do all that kind of time consuming like layering, like various things that you have to do to kind of plant the foundations of something, but you still need to be capable yourself of then interpreting that and evolving it forwards. So at the moment it feels quite friendly in that respect.
Yeah, I think that it's, these startups and Silicon Valley and so on have always used the term disruptive and so on. And I think there is no doubt that this technology is going to be disruptive. And in my opinion, and I think why it's really important to start thinking about it, is that it will be disruptive in a way that we cannot imagine. If you take a company like a law firm, for example, who currently I don't know how much you would charge out per day, but it's going to be significant. Newer versions of an idea like ChatGPT will absolve any need for a lot of like litigation and infrastructure around law firms to even exist in the space of days. It's if you extrapolate to think about companies who are writing SEO based content and so on, the more powerful models are going to be able to write considerably better content in the space of a year or so. So the value that is going to hold for a company like OpenAI is going to be very, very significant. And what you'll find, and this is my interpretation, but it seems to be the way that these models are going, is that so ChatGPT, for example, kind of has a certain level of knowledge on a certain type of thing. I would assume that the enterprise version of that will allow a law firm, for example, to input billions and billions of data points in there to refine a model that's very specific to their company and how they work. So you'll have ChatGPT for this New York law firm or something who hold the power of artificial intelligence, but have this extra data set that allows them to refine what it is that they're working on. And I think like what we've found with our own experimentation in video games is that we're now training our own models on games that we're working on and so on. So we're having, arguably, we now have some of the best trained data sets for certain types of games to generate imagery in those styles. And I think that's where you'll see it being kind of democratized, is that people will have, a very powerful version that's quite narrow in what they're actually doing. So there's a lot of things that I think are worth considering, but as it currently stands, these are tools to help creative people, help people in all industries augment their work as it currently stands.
And if you're looking lots at the media in terms of artificial intelligence and where all of this will develop in the future, there is this school of thought which entertains paints a bleak future. Even Elon Musk refers to this, that there is this point of where the artificial intelligence would take over the humanity. But on the future aspect of things, and in terms of business, where would you think will be the next platforms which could encapsulate AI, which would help business individuals?
I think in what's going to be very, very interesting in I'll answer it in two kind of different ways, but I think you're going to have the ability in probably a fairly short space of time for people to just ask questions about what is the best way for them to use their time in all industries, and for AI to help augment them, answer those sorts of questions. Now, some of the challenges around that, and I think this is probably the best example for that, is how Google Maps has, and there's a study that's been done, has shrunk the hippocampus of the brain that deals with things like spatial navigation. So there is no real need for us to know where we're going. We don't need to remember landmarks. We don't need to put that into our memory. However, what's happening with that is that because we don't need to do that anymore, it dramatically affects so many other parts of memory recall and going from short-term to long-term memory. So I think that what's very, very important on the ethical side in all businesses and from the companies who are building these tools, that people's jobs aren't replaced to the point where they don't need to think as much anymore.
So more in the productivity kind of side of things, would you say?
Yeah. I would hope that if you in our company, the best way it can be used is to free people's times from the burden of jobs that don't require a huge amount of creative thinking and can be automated and can be solved with different systems like something like ChatGPT. That's where I see it being of benefit. And in terms of what industries I think it will touch, I think it will be global, because it already if you take ChatGPT just as an example, it probably can already augment every sort of white collar work in some way. It can help with it. Yeah. Does that answer what?
How is it possible to given the type of companies that are involved in this like endeavor, how do you think it's going to be possible for that to be controlled in that respect? Like, how can we ensure that in the next 5, 10, 15 years and beyond, that this maintains its benefits and doesn't go so far that it becomes detrimental to us?
Well, yeah, I mean, the reality is, with all of these companies, they might have the term, they might be called OpenAI or something, but they're all backed by the big companies. Microsoft, they're backed by Meta, they're backed by companies like that. However, there are companies, and a good example, although the CEO is a hedge fund manager, but Stability AI, which is a company that make Stable Diffusion, are open source. So they've open sourced their version of ChatGPT. They've open sourced their image generation models. What they're doing is they're putting that power in the hands of individuals and in the hands of companies. Now, with the speed of change and the fact that now you don't need a supercomputer to train these types of data sets, there's the utopian idea is that a lot of this power can be downloaded onto a relatively mid-level powerful machine, sort of £2,000 machine, work offline and have the same power as a sort of supercomputer, which is in some ways democratizing this technology for let's say, for example, a school in a developing country that has no access to the internet. In a short space of time, will be able to download a data set for education that allows them to harness this like incredible power of AI without the need for expensive resources. And so how it's managed is an important part of the big companies to make sure that they know what their technology is doing. I think like Elon Musk has stepped away from OpenAI because he felt that AI research should be open source and it shouldn't be closed. And obviously what ChatGPT currently is yes, it's free, but it won't be. It will be very powerful and it will be paid for. So I think I think the speed of change is going to determine what and how companies use it. But some of the biggest players are providing their information open source and allowing companies to then build on top of that. And I think that's where there's the potential, and this is me speaking in a utopian way, that the potential is for capitalism to still exist in its current way, but for companies to genuinely be able to pay their employees to work 3 days a week, but AI has augmented them to continue doing the job for the other 2 days. That's my that would be my dream.
And if you're talking about businesses, how can they maybe prepare in advance from the big wave of AI?
Yeah,
Should they have maybe a person allocated specifically to this topic?
I think it's I think this technology, and I know we're just sort of talking about image, and we're talking about the tech stuff at the moment, but my take on it is that this is going to be very disruptive, and you're going to see whole industries essentially being replaced with a bot that can just answer questions. And I website copy, for example, is a place where you can see the speed of these models being able to write interesting content that's written for optimized for search engines in seconds. And I think that, to your point, I think it's very important that people in tech industries and probably beyond at least have people who have an interest in this, because as opposed to sort of tech before, I think this is something that we really should be considering, because what we don't want to get into a position, especially in tech companies, is where people's creative roles don't exist anymore. And there's with some of the image models, there's like a backlash with artists wanting to be removed from the data sets and so on. And I guess the same will probably apply with ChatGPT, where you can train, there'll be the ability to train your models on a type of writing. So if somebody, an author that has like a very eloquent way of writing, you can train a model on that, and then you just have their data set to use however you want. But I think that the most interesting thing is that the way that it will probably change is unknown. And if I just give you one quick example on that, the image generation AI that's being used at the moment, you can sort of generate an image based on a text prompt, like astronaut riding a horse is the common thing to test it on. That when I started doing this stuff only about a year ago, you're looking at 30 minutes per image to generate it. It uses a type of technology called clip diffusion, but 30 minutes for a text prompt to go to an image, that's now down to less than a second for a text prompt to an image. In the next 3 months, those image generation models will, with the right computer power, will be generating it real time. So what's crazy, especially in that world, is that there's theoretically, all entertainment can be generated by the individual just asking for something.
So essentially, you're creating maybe your own entertainment, your own TV show, maybe, because I've seen also this kind of video generating AI platforms. You have this actor, so actually you're creating your own videos for presentation purposes, or what?
For presentations, well, the assumption would be that the power for presentations, let's say a company's going into a presentation with a client, that you just need to write what you want the presentation to be, and it will generate it for you. Now, that's kind of intimidating.
I've seen TikTok accounts with hundreds of thousands or tens of thousands of followers, only AI generated content in video format.
It's crazy. And I don't know at what point you sort of lose value, because I think humans have always wanted connections with other humans. And going back to like 2016, when this company DeepMind beat the best Go player, they made a documentary about it, which is really good. I'd recommend watching it. And what they talked about is what you felt watching it was that you want the humans to succeed. And it's the same, that I feel at work. I don't want to see people who have the skill of illustrating to be redundant because an AI can do it faster. And I think in terms of business sort of works on people engaging with each other and being friendly and so on. And I think that what's really important is to not lose that. What I missed in the pandemic was being in the office talking to people and just having banter. And that idea is concerning.
When it comes to the whole like ethics of it, do you foresee, or is there already some kind of like suggestion that this will happen, like some kind of like global legislation regarding how it's applied and how it's used, or do you think that it's just too like powerful and there's just too much money involved to actually have that happen?
I think if you look at some of the like the Mark Zuckerberg deposition, where you had 70-year-old men essentially asking Mark Zuckerberg how they log into their Facebook account, gives you an idea that trying to legislate for tech that's changing by the day is implausible. And I don't know how you're going to. One of the things that I think is sort of concerning is that there will be people who will prioritize profit over employee retention. And if you have a team of 10 copywriters that can be replaced, not necessarily replaced, but their work can be sort of augmented to the point that you don't need them so much, it's on the employer to not have that happen. Because the dystopian take on that is that once nobody has a job, then these sort of tools are sort of redundant anyway. What's the point of a marketing agency if nobody can afford to buy anything? Like we're seeing that in the UK with the cost of living and so on, is that things are just really expensive. And it doesn't really matter whether you've got targeted ads. If you haven't got the money to buy stuff, then you're not going to buy stuff.
Yeah. One question I have, going back a little bit, is like ChatGPT to me is something that kind of suddenly like emerged from nowhere a few months ago. And when I look at AI within like tech and the tech that we use within marketing, it's kind of been around and we've heard it being used. And, I've had to try and get my head around it enough to try to sell it in some cases. But has there been like a massive acceleration over the last like 12 months or so? Or is this just a perception for people like me? Have you seen more of a gradual kind of advancement, or is it really just suddenly really kind of picking up speed?
It's really picking up speed, and it's based on a few different research papers that harnessed certain types of AI. So there's something called RLHF, which is reinforcement learning using human feedback, and that essentially allows a AI to be trained by teaching itself to answer certain questions, with humans inputting at points saying this is good, this is bad, and so on. And the other thing that's quite new is a model called the attention model, which allows an AI to pick up on some of the concepts and the principles of things. So with image generation, back in the day, it was the AI sort of could stitch images together and so on. Now that's not what happens now. It's using that the AI has an understanding of the principles of how images work and exist, and how what a good image looks like, and so on. So yeah, you're essentially right that it's been a few different research papers that have really, really elevated these ideas, but a lot of the ideas are based on 1 or 2 decades old information. But again, the other thing that's leveled it quite a lot is that compute power, or GPU power, which is used to train a lot of these models, has just accelerated massively. And in terms of the speed of acceleration now, it's not like we've got to peak ChatGPT. We're at the consensus in the AI community is that we're at toddler stage with things like ChatGPT. So you might be getting your companies to answer certain, you might be using ChatGPT to answer certain questions, but you're effectively at this point, you're asking a toddler to write some copy for you. And if you extrapolate that to where it will be in the future, it's going to be very, very, very powerful.
I guess it's like if you look at if you look at any other tech, right, is you have like the free tool and then you have the actual tool, and we're currently using the free tool.
And that language model is trained from data from you might have found that when you're writing stuff in ChatGPT, they'll say, oh, I haven't heard of this, my model was trained on data from pre-2021 and so on. So that's where there's going to be this huge power for different companies and different businesses to do harness these like really niche bits of data what only exists to them.
And just wanted to ask you, moving back to the workplace, and how can we integrate artificial intelligence into maybe putting this repetitive task, because everyone has this repetitive tasks, maybe put those on autopilot somehow and just use our creative, just focusing on the creative endeavors. Because I'm asking because recently a Romanian company called UiPath, it's an RPA, by the way, just it's a unicorn company now. It surpasses the $1 billion threshold, and just maybe we can even compare what is RPA, what is actually artificial intelligence in terms of making those repetitive tasks more automatized.
So I think people have the habit of using the term AI quite loosely to suggest that their work has some sort of general intelligence around their tools, but they automation kind of can help solve a lot of repetitive tasks and so on. That isn't necessarily true intelligence, and I think the implementation of how these tools will come to the workplace is yet to be decided. But I do think that some of the companies who we've seen it with companies who are building quite a niche product, something like ChatGPT or Stable Diffusion has entirely obliterated their concept because it's solvable in an entirely different way.
I guess that's also like the issue. I don't know anything about this at all. It's just an assumption. But you talked before about GAI, right? This general AI. I guess the issue with that is when you get to that level of things, like you're kind of losing the requirement for the other tech that already exists today. So that would pretty much fill the gap that other tech is currently serving, and everything will become centralized in these, big tech companies like it already has done to a degree. And smaller tech will start to become a bit more, dormant.
Yeah, it's really hard to see what happens when you have a model that can do and think genuinely intelligently, and then not only answer questions from human input, but decide on what their own questions are. Because the intelligent assumption, right, of having a kind of superior being would be that the first thing that we need to solve is like the scourge of humanity, right? If you wanted to continue having a sustainable planet, the first thing we need to do is to stop people damaging it. But yeah, so that's the like dystopian idea of the singularity, where you have a machine becomes sentient, and then you're entirely redundant, and every single human is. But I don't think it will play out in quite that way. But I think it will play out in ways that we don't quite understand. And like I said, the idea that the entertainment industry can be tailored to the individual's requirements. So if I want a show like the US Office, but that's set in a advertising agency, can be generated on the fly, that's genuinely good, is an entirely different way of even thinking. But the tools are now already there for that to potentially become a reality. So where does that leave the entertainment industry, and how do you manage that?
Where is your where is your position on it right now? Like, just out of interest, are you kind of like excited currently, or are you already starting to feel a sense that with all of these big like kind of evolutions in technology, there's almost like inevitable like damaging effects that tend to outweigh the benefits in the end? Are you positive about this, or are you more kind of cautious?
I'm super positive, because I've got two small children, and I want them to live in a better world, and I think that AI is going to answer some of the questions that allow us to do that. There was a paper that came out recently that AI is being used to solve some of the issues with nuclear fusion. And whilst we're not at a point where we can have fusion reactors, theoretically, nuclear fusion will be plausible, which means providing the infrastructures there, free energy for all forever, which does a long way to going towards a happier human race. So I think that because of the complexity of AI, that the people that are working in these companies generally have good ethics, and they're not necessarily, or at least the individuals aren't necessarily for profit. But as with all tools, what you'd hope is that it frees humans to do things that they want to do more. And whilst that hasn't necessarily been the case, the money exists in the world for humans to now have an abundant lifestyle and do what they want. Now, that isn't what humans do, but the money is there to facilitate it. So is AI the answer that kind of helps deal with some of those issues? Because I would love to be spending my time walking around the countryside in Wales. I like my work, and I see the value in being engaged and trying to solve problems and so on. But also like free time, and AI hasn't yet solved that.
I'm probably like I don't know. Maybe I'm kind of being the like the more negative voice here, but it just sounds a bit like how we used to and still do today, talk about the internet, and it feels a little bit about how we talk about these like living wage experiments and things. There's this like utopian view and a dystopian view, and with the internet, for example, I think most people of our generation, we kind of think, okay, it's cool. There's opportunities. There's lots of things we didn't have when we were young that we can take advantage of, but there's so much negative connotations linked to what we have today. And I feel instinctively like I worry about that. It feels like a step further away from where we used to be. And
do you think, if you look holistically, do you think the world is in the best place it's been?
Yeah. So this is true. And I'm always saying this to other people, right? So when people start saying, oh, there's so much horrible things happening in the world today and all these kind of things, and we see it every day on social media, on the news, on all these kind of things, that such bad things are happening, I'm always kind of like, I guess, the voice of reason in that situation, as saying, yeah, we didn't know before, how much bad stuff was happening,
yeah.
but it was always happening. And when you look statistically, we live a better, safer, like more comfortable life. However, it's just when it comes to like the day-to-day living. I also have 2 children, and my biggest worry is just this over-consumption of technology, and AI just feels like it's another step forward in that way.
Well, yeah, there's like, yeah, I completely agree with some of what with some of what you're saying. I I think that so there was a study recently which gives you an idea of, I think as people get older, they generally don't understand children and teenagers before, and that's been the same in forever in history. But there was a study where they talked about where they asked teenagers how many streams of media they thought they could consume, and the average was 7 at one time.
Okay.
So they can be watching that. Now, I don't believe that isn't true, because that isn't what humans aren't designed to consume, that amount of content. But the assumption is that they can be watching Netflix on their phone, having a conversation and reading, and 3 other types of media all at the same time, which is just not the case. You do not become engaged in a film if you're also on your phone. It's very clear.
Yeah.
So I think that it's the responsibility of parents, and I think it's the responsibility of educators to help people understand that that isn't necessarily the best use of your time. And I think that if you look at Meta, who are a huge company, they're losing daily active users because people don't like being controlled. They're understanding that they're being manipulated, that having a free platform doesn't mean free. It means that they're holding your information and they're holding your time. And things like AI are gonna, you would hope that it can provide better answers and better ways of using your time rather than endlessly scrolling through TikTok or whatever. Saying that, the power of those algorithms are phenomenal, and I understand how they work. And yet, if I'm on the YouTube Shorts, I can keep scrolling indefinitely, and it drives me mad.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, I guess this is a interesting topic, maybe to dive into a really fast. Maybe how can we tie together artificial intelligence and the new type of economy, the attention economy, and how are creators going to apply artificial intelligence, all those interesting tools, to in their strategies, basically? Do you have any thoughts revolving this?
I think the fact that with with the idea that creators are now there is so much content available that the individuals and the creators and so on need to more than ever make sure that what they're putting out is of real value.
Exactly,
and it has
yeah.
real content to it. And what I would hope with the change in algorithms of how Google rank websites and so on is less about writing, for example, SEO content, and more about really valuable information. And I think that this is where it's the individual or the company's responsibility. I think that's where the companies still will generate revenue by creating work that has real value.
Yeah.
And I think that's been the case for forever. A good film doesn't need to cost $20 million, $100 million to make.
Yeah.
And what I think a lot of these tools do, especially in the early stages of creative work, and not just in creative industries, I think they allow you to answer the question of whether this is a valuable thing that you're working on or doing, or
Yeah.
a quickly concepting ideas.
Well, I guess the challenge
That-
is
yeah,
because artificial intelligence emulates very, very well the human, let's say, communication or behavior. So there's, I think, the
Yeah.
challenge would be, or the fine line, in order to see, okay, this is a content produced by a human being based on his subjective, let's say, critical thoughts, so on and so forth, and then you have the
Yeah.
AI-generated content. Those
But
would
this is what we've already like kind of communicated internally a little bit when it comes to content, which is we need to now double down on being like, you know, putting our opinion at the beginning of what we're writing, being very creative, you know, having this unique take on things, because that will really differentiate ourselves from this mass like content that's AI generated.
Yeah. And I think that's the case. And I think that certainly as it currently stands, if people are copying verbatim a ChatGPT response into their website blog post or something, it doesn't hold proper value.
No.
It doesn't hold like intrinsic value. And the other thing around that is that humans want to see other humans succeed, and they want to interact with humans, and that doesn't work with just a company that runs solely off AI.
Well, I guess this.
So no, that's why I'm positive. Then.
I'm glad you're so positive, honestly, because I am playing devil's advocate a little bit. I am quite excited about what it kind of means and what changes we'll see. But it's good to hear someone like you who's like thinking deeply about this, actually, you know, seeing the positives. It makes me have more of a kind of positive attitude too.
I just feel that that children growing up it's like things like this should help answer should alleviate a lot of the thing. My wife's a teacher, and having AI do some of the work that is just arbitrary and sort of fairly redundant alleviates her to focus on like the important part of these of what teaching children are.
Yeah, it's true. I think many thanks for all your knowledge shared with us today. Maybe we can move into our last segment of our podcast. If you guys have any, or Matt, if you don't have any other question for now.
I think I could talk forever about this topic, but yeah, it's
I think we covered the essentials for our audience, and we can move on to our one of the most requested basically section of our audience, of our tweepers, and which is the top 5. Usually we're doing top 5, you decide, but talking about AI today, I think would be interesting to see the top 5 use cases in your opinion, Tom Price.
If I move forward a bit in time, I think the idea that individuals can generate content that generate entertainment that is tailored to them and very specifically what they're interested in holds. You could get very, very deep on this topic in terms of the ethics around it and so on, but I think the interest around that is sort of fascinating. So when image generation platforms can run real time, the type of work that's going to be created is going to be really, really interesting. I think that with ChatGPT, I think where you have models refined, highly tuned models for individual organizations are going to open up the ability for people who were predominantly being used to do repetitive tasks to be freer to answer creative problems. And I think that can extend to, nobody joins a company to just fill in spreadsheets or, maybe that's me not being fair, but I think that that all people have. So I guess actually that's sort of one use case. A third one is that the importance of play and the importance of what we spoke about at the start with flow states and so on, I don't think I can emphasize enough about how important that is. And I think that the ability for AI to remove, it sort of goes back to the same one a little bit, but removes the redundant idea of doing repetitive work and gives you the opportunity to like exist in a flow state is going to be is really valuable. Just so I think a lot of my the use cases kind of apply to the same thing, but there's a couple that I think are really going to be valuable. Like I spoke about before, nuclear fusion is on the cusp of being solved. Is it going to be solved in 2023? Probably not. But the idea of endless free energy for all is a utopian like dream, but it is potentially plausible. I think that another place where we're seeing like really valuable uses for AI is in medicine and cancer diagnosis. You have ethically now, eye doctors are being asked to consult an AI on retinal cancer because it's deemed ethically inappropriate to not use AI because of the power of it. And then I think finally, it's another kind of health thing. I think that there are going to be tools that help people. So I'm really like interested in the importance of what the gut biome plays, the role that plays on individuals. So what exists in your stomach, because it's now known that the immune system is directly impacted by your gut biome. But nutrition is like fundamentally one of the most complicated topics, because the one person that needs red meat in their diet is entirely the way their body makeup is an entirely different way of it exists in a very different way that somebody else might. So I think the ability, and again, this may be not 2023, the ability for individuals to understand how nutrition plays a vital role in their health and well-being, both mentally and physically. AI is going to be able to answer some of that and give you genuine advice on how your nutrition should work. Because I know from the British government that they say cut down on certain things, have a certain amount of calories. Now that just doesn't make any sense because individuals work entirely differently. So I think that's something else that's going to be hugely valuable.
Sounds awesome. You saw, just a random point, but you saw, I don't know if you're aware of the company Heights. I think you knew I was going to say this, right, Dragos? Heights is like this subscription vitamin company that have kind of built in public and are a bit more kind of trendy, I guess, than the traditional vitamin companies. They've just released a new product which is all about gut health. And I agree, it's something that I've been kind of researching and thinking about. That would be an awesome use case for sure.
Well, yeah, the problem with the advice and supplements and so on is that and there are companies actually that are starting to do this, is that it isn't tailored to the individual. But I do think that there are companies where you send off stool samples and so on, and they send you back like probiotic type of things. But
it's quite a good exchange.
Yeah. I know you might be sort of less positive on that side, but if there's a simple, affordable way to answer, help your mental health because by understanding your nutrition, I think that's like super valuable, and it's
Yeah.
really valuable in a wide. It's really valuable.
Yeah, 100%. I think that'd be an awesome use case, and I agree that all of these things, mental health, gut health, physical health, how you're spending your time, this kind of stuff.
But then you have
it's all such a complex balance.
But then you have the blend of the actual hardware and biology. The neural link, whatever Elon Musk is working on.
Yeah. I was pro Neuralink until I found out how many monkeys have died from having Neuralinks put into them, and it's quite significant, which is a bit of a shame. I think I'm a sort of advocate of AI, and as opposed to nearly everybody else that I'm friends with, who are like, I'm not having a chip put in my brain, and I can sort of see where there is potentially benefits to it. What I don't agree with is animal testing for products, really. But there's the one of the things which I wouldn't put in a use case here, but when tools augment humans' capabilities, they have they get taken up very, very quickly, and an iPhone is a perfect example of that. Like, it was a tool that's Apple's sort of motto about building things that we didn't know we needed, and having a phone has 100% augmented people's ability to do things. Whether I necessarily agree that it's good, it still has been beneficial. And in business, when you look at AI, more powerful versions of ChatGPT, that will be a necessity for companies to implement into their system when they cannot keep up with the competitors.
Absolutely, yeah.
Well, many thanks for sharing your thoughts with our Twippers. And so, folks,
I hope it wasn't too sporadic, but
no,
it
was
perfect.
I found it really, really fascinating. Absolutely.
We had today
amazing.
Tom Price, technical lead at the Diva Agency. They're doing very, very interesting stuff. I'll highly encouraging you to check them out. For all the other all of you, stay tuned to our next episode. Make sure you subscribe and hit the like button on our YouTube channel, because it helps massively with the algorithm. You can check us out also on other podcast carriers like Spotify. And up until the next time, keep it up. Thank you very much.
Cheers, guys. Cheers, Tom.